Hey everybody, Marcus here. On August 6th, the channel of Mayor of MGTOWN was taken down by YouTube. Since then, the mayor has started a new channel to continue the great work he has been doing for almost 2 years now. The mayor is a pillar of our community and is running an outreach project to help homeless men. In addition, he has done a great deal to bring attention to new channels, including my own. As such, we must take the initiative to rehydrate his subscriber count, as he had over 7,000 subs before his channel was taken down. It is important for us as a community to send a message to those who would see MGTOW brought down. We must send the message that if you take one of us down, you are wasting your time, as MGTOW will rally to bring them back up. I am linking to the mayor's new channel in the description box, and I implore you to go subscribe if you have been a subscriber before. If you have never heard of the mayor of MGTOWN before, then I encourage you to check him out, as his work is not only excellent, but his character is beyond reproach. To all content producers, I also encourage you to promote the mayor's new channel in his time of need, as tomorrow it may be your time of need. I, for one, am honored to be in the same community as the mayor and will do my part. So, I received a comment on one of my videos that I feel needs a longer and more personal answer than the comment section can provide. So, I'll read the comment as a whole first. It comes from someone calling himself Anaximander, and it was left on my Virtue Ethics MGTOW account video. Now, Anaximander says, "Great video. I really like the concept of MGTOW as a path towards the development of virtus, as I have never felt that simply not wanting to get married or enter into relationships with women was enough to cover what MGTOW truly was. However, I have a question. I'm one of these people toiling away at a meaningless, low-paying job, which gives me no satisfaction. I'm disillusioned with women and have no faith in the American dream or realistic expectations of entering into any of the careers which I might find fulfilling. When I was a child, I thought to become a scientist and thus make some great discovery or invention which could ensure my legacy. It seems like the logical solution at the time. Now, I find myself in this position, and it seems to me that my own personal MGTOW path would consist largely of reading and trying to understand the world. I want to come to understand such things, such subjects as philosophy and quantum mechanics and economics. It's not impossible that in doing so I will better enable myself to make some kind of contribution, either within the MGTOW community or outside of it. However, at this time, I feel so far behind the curve in terms of my education, skills, and finances that the prospect of actually making any kind of meaningful, long-lasting impact on the world is something that I have to feel extremely pessimistic about. So my question is this: if I have no assurance that the knowledge will lead to any kind of concrete positive outcome, is the pursuit of knowledge for itself not just another form of hedonism? I ask this because to me the question of why I shouldn't kill myself is a pressing one, and not one that can be assuaged by some careless reassurance or, I think, by therapy. For the record, I have not yet read Camus, but mean to. Anaximander, I will answer your explicit question at the end of this video, but between now and then, I want to address the overarching framework that you are asking it under. The last paragraph, your pressing need to have an account of why not to kill yourself, is very concerning to me. It concerns me, not from a place of pity, no. I would not throw such an insult at you after all. It concerns me because there is serenity in what you say. You know, it triggered a sense of shame in me when I connected the serenity with the gravity of the message and the thematically theoretical nature of most MGTOW videos, including all but one of mine. And most significantly for me, it shamed me because I know better than, given my familiarity with philosophy. At least I should know better. First and foremost, philosophy is about people. and the struggles of day-to-day issues that men and women face in their existential condition. Socrates would roam the streets of Athens and help people deal with their day-to-day concerns. Though the Platonic dialogues always evolved into highly abstract ideas, the reason those abstract ideas ever came up is because of some day-to-day issue an Athenian was dealing with, and in attempting to help that Athenian figure out their issue, Socrates needed to elevate the Athenian's thinking to a level where the solution can be found. Einstein had a good quote to describe this phenomenon. He said that a problem cannot be solved by the same thinking in which the problem was created in. Where philosophy is about helping people, so too MGTOW at the end of the day is about helping men deal with their day-to-day issues. And for the most part, this is done by attempting to elevate the listener to the level of thinking where the solution or explanation can be found. So for me, doubly so, the task of attempting to give philosophical accounts of MGTOW ideas, I should be starting from the day-to-day issues and working my arguments up to the more abstract things. So far, it has been all too common for video makers to talk mostly in the abstract. Though this is valuable, it is not always obvious how to bridge the abstract with the ultimate goal of dealing with the day-to-day. Anaximander, the life you describe, and the view you have of this life is surely shared by many men. It is this day-to-day reality that is your starting point, and any philosophy, advice, or ideas that can't start from that place are at best a curiosity and, at worst, just a waste of time. Because it really makes no difference what destination someone preaches if that destination can't be reached from where you are now. So, in this video, I want to address you directly with the hope that I reveal paths and detours in your thinking that have not been considered before. In addition, any other men who relate to your situation can hopefully profit from it as well. First, I believe that you can only be led by someone to a destination that that person has arrived at, as that is the only path such a person knows. A poor man, for example, cannot guide someone to wealth lest he was wealthy once himself. And in this way, a movie star cannot guide you to become an astronaut, or the reverse. A miserable man cannot lead someone to happiness, and the sick cannot guide you to health. So, with these premises in place, whatever I say needs to be understood in leading to the sort of life I lead. Nietzsche comes to the same conclusion when he says that a philosopher's philosophy is his confession, and to understand the philosophy, you need to understand the philosopher. In this way, I can only lead you to where I am, and to know where that is, well, you need to know a little bit about me and my journey. On this journey, however, I hope you will see where at some point your path and mine cross. My family is one that started poor. My parents had a working class background, with my father working in construction and my mother as an elementary school teacher. Much like the 2008 crash that happened, the financial well-being of my family was highly sensitive to the state of the economy. There were many hardships throughout my childhood, to the extent where my father would dumpster dive to try and find a present for me for Christmas. It was the board of the game Sorry, with a marble stuck in one of the board positions and a broken clicker. That's what my dad digged out of the dumpster that Christmas. We had to use coins as game pieces and supply our own dice. I would myself resort to dumpster diving as an 8-year-old and collect crushed beer cans and empty beer bottles to sell back for the deposit. There was always a tension related to money in my family. Money was what everything was reduced to. Judgments of success and failure, worth and worthlessness of people, status and disrepute, joy and sadness. Everything, absolutely everything, was reduced to money. Now, at this point, I want to take a little detour, Anaximander, and talk to you about the Platonic dialogue called the Republic. In this dialogue, the day-to-day issue is what is just and what is unjust. As today, in the ancient world, people would argue about this subject just as fiercely, and the common answers are not really any different than what they are now. So, after a few arguments about justice being that what the powerful deem right, and other similar things that Socrates refutes, the general question is asked about what justice itself is. Now, what is relevant and important to us right now is not the answer to this question, but things that come up when trying to answer this question. Socrates, at one point in the argument, says that perhaps justice in the soul is hard to define because we as humans are short sighted and that it is too close to us to be able to see. So, what we should do is look at something much bigger and try and find justice in that to compensate for our short sightedness. And by short sighted, we mean that condition you need to get glasses for. Socrates then analogizes the soul to the state, which is a much bigger thing we can look at. And his argument is that if we can find where justice is in the state, then we can also be able to see where it is in the soul. At one point, when talking about the different government types, Socrates says that there is a hierarchy of governments in which one government tends to, well, degenerate into one below it. He also describes how this degeneration comes about. Now, the particular degeneration we are interested in is that from timocracy, which he sees as being full of people who love power and honor, to that of oligarchy, where it is the rich who rule because the majority value money above all. Now, what is important is to look at how the oligarch, the person who loves money, comes to be. Socrates says that when a man sees his father suffering from the pangs of poverty, he learns to despise it, and will begin to look to money as the highest aim in preventing his own suffering due to that same poverty. You see, Anaximander, I became the oligarch. This tension, these crises due to poverty, were something that I would not suffer myself. So, what happened to me? Well, I became really good at making money. My siblings as well. Even though each of our paths took very different roads to generating it, I was the only one who went to university. That was my path to money. My brothers succeeded in trades after years of various failed money-making schemes. My sister hunkered down and through sheer brute force and saving amassed wealth for herself. But the paths we each chose are just details. The same spirit was in all of us. The oligarch in us was the strongest part, and so every choice was painted by this deeply rooted desire. The funny thing is that when we would speak the phrase, money is not everything, and money won't make you happy, these were common and well understood euphemisms we would express as part of our beliefs. And you know what? We were not lying, not even to ourselves. What was not spoken out loud, well, because it was so deeply concealed, were the ends of those euphemisms. Money is not everything, but it's first in order of priority. And money won't make you happy, but not having it will make you miserable. So, with my oligarch soul firmly set from my childhood, I went to university, took a degree in a money-making field, because you know what? I should do whatever job makes me happy, as long as it makes lots of cash. Then I started my career. I found a woman who was obliging in my money-making attitude. She always made sure I would never wear myself out with the burden of having to spend it, though. She had to contribute her share to the work of the relationship as well. And you know what? I didn't spend on myself. Part of the oligarch spirit is miserliness. I would wear the same clothes year on end. Sweatshirts, unmatched socks, shirts with holes in them. It was all good. Why buy new stuff? The old stuff still fits fine. To this day, I have clothing well over 15 years old. So my decisions ruled in the house where they were anchored around money making. We need to move so I can earn more? We move. My foot has been put down. And she ruled how it was spent by, well, spending it. I was happy. She was happy. Everybody was winning. I started my own business at one point. Lucked out with my first product and was making tons of money and working on my first round of funding to expand operations. I started this business because, well, I grew grossly dissatisfied with my field, the mundaneness of my day-to-day. Every day the exact same thing. The methods changed, but the problem stayed the same. It is typical that in my field, people burn out after 7 years. Many retrain or go down the management path. I was burnt out on the management path, and there was nothing left in my field but to go down, which was a dreaded prospect. I was in a dead-end job, but worse, a dead-end career. So, my own business was the last thing possible that offered hope. I could still use skills I developed before, but it was a choose-your-own-adventure path this time around. Then, as one would expect this story goes, the wife has an affair, and the typical hypergamous nonsense takes hold of her. Suffice to say, she leaves me. I had sunk so much of my identity into her that it completely shattered my world. This whole process of leaving me, however, was dragged out over a year. I would throw money at the problem, hoping it would go away, but nothing helped. She ended up leaving me for a guy I considered grossly beneath me, and, well, still do, but now for very different reasons. It was a year of torment. My business goes under soon after. I was stuck in debt, unemployed, and alone for the first time in a decade. The entirety of my value system was unraveled. You see, I did everything right in life according to the values I held, the values of the oligarch, even according to the values held dear by society for the most part. I worked hard. I was not abusive. I helped around the house. I did not have any debilitating vices. Everything was as it should have been. So how the hell did all of this happen? Now, at this point, I want to make another digression. Socrates has a certain method in his argumentation. He would often find himself in a conversation with an Athenian who would make some sort of claim to knowledge. What this means is that Socrates would be talking to an Athenian who was convinced that he knew what, say, beauty is, or what piety is, or love, or whatever else may be the talking point at that point. Well, Socrates would always take these men seriously because he wanted to learn from such men the knowledge they claimed to possess. So, Socrates would start asking these men questions about the subject they claimed knowledge of. As they answered, it would slowly become apparent that these guys had no idea what the hell they're talking about. So, at some point in the dialogue, Socrates would execute an elenchus on them. Now, an elenchus is just a fancy word meaning that he would refute the Athenian by catching him in a contradiction in his own belief system. Well, if the Athenian was genuinely intellectually honest, this would throw him into a state of aporia. Aporia, now, is a state of puzzlement and bewilderment. What Socrates had effectively done was undermine the belief system of the person he was talking to. The Athenian would realize for himself that, in truth, he does not actually know anything about the subject he was convinced about just a few minutes earlier. The Athenian was forced to face his own ignorance. It is from this state of aporia that the real work could begin. You see, a man who has a conviction that he possesses knowledge on a subject will never go looking for that knowledge. After all, he is convinced he possesses it already. It is only when faced with the reality that he in fact does not know will he begin the search. Well, life had just executed one giant elenchus on me. But unlike Socrates, who did it for one subject, for me, life, in one sweep, executed an elenchus against all my core values all at once. Those values that are your foundation for every other value you hold. I was cast into a world I could no longer ground myself in. I trusted nothing of what I believed. I had no reason to. After all, I did everything right. And it all turned to shit. At the time this was happening, I knew nothing of philosophy. In fact, philosophy as a concept had probably not crossed my mind in years, and when it did, it was only a euphemism for, someone's opinion. So here I am. I've lost everything of value to me. I lost my wife, who turned out to be an adulterer, which I feared all throughout our relationship. I lost all my money and accrued a whole deal of debt. I lost my company. I had lost the last hope in my field, as going back to work for someone was a gut-wrenching prospect that would result in, well, a major pay cut. To top it off, the feeling of despair was so strong that I lost the capacity to work altogether, even if I wanted to. There were weeks where I would eat only each third day. I would throw up several times a day. My sense of taste was greatly reduced, with a constant flavor of bile and stomach acids burning away my taste buds. Everything smelled bad for some reason. I was pale and sickly. I isolated myself completely from the world. I only left the house to get food, which was not often considering I ate so rarely. I had to relearn to eat. I had to logically build up a justification for why I need to eat. I'm serious. I would lay there and think, what is this feeling? Well, I think it's hunger. Now, why am I feeling it? Well, probably because I'm hungry. Now, why am I hungry? Because I need food? Why do I need food? Because the human body needs food? Okay, this must mean I should eat. Yeah, that's how it works, I think. I'm dead serious. I would trust nothing I believed in before. Naturally, well, I considered suicide, but dismissed it because I thought I was making too many assumptions and could not trust any conclusion I came to. I revisited the subject several times over the first few weeks, and every time I didn't have the confidence in my thinking to come to a decision. I suspended judgment. I left it on the table until I found a proof of whether I should do it, well, or not. It was about 2 months before the physical withdrawal of this trauma started to subside, and by then I had regained enough of my confidence in my instincts on day-to-day things that I could start to function on a level, resembling a human being. Everything I had described would truly not make sense to me until years later. When I was no longer of the mind that had created the situation I found myself in. What I did not know at the time was how good things were about to get. I had never heard of MGTOW and was blue pill through and through. I had no depth to me at that time either. I was not even deep enough to be considered shallow. Now, one of my first journeys into the world at this point was to go to the bookstore. When I got there, I saw a book and literally judged it by its cover and bought it. Philosophy as a Way of Life by Pierre Hadot. It was on some, discount shelf and had this cool cover with the word philosophy in this blood red script-like font scrawled across it. The cover was just so fucking cool. So I took this book home and eventually got around to reading it. And this was 5 years ago. One thing I immediately noticed was how many of the words I didn't understand. It was an uphill battle on getting through page after page. For at least 2 to 4 words per page I had to look up in the dictionary. The book read like some sort of sorcerer's manual. All these ideas I had lived almost 30 years and never encountered were now being presented to me. And the most terrifying thing was that these ideas were reasoned through. Not only reasoned through, but reasoned with rigor I had never even imagined. It was pure logical poetry. It soothed my brain, considering the irrational nonsense that was my life the previous 12 months. The content explained to me so much of what I had no idea I needed to know that it sparked this avalanche of curiosity. The book talked about, many different philosophers, from which the only name I vaguely recognized was Plato, who I remembered from some conspiratorial video I watched on YouTube about Atlantis. After finishing the book, I immediately went out and bought the complete works of Plato. and for the first time found myself in the philosophy section of a bookstore. Plato, as I anticipated, was blowing my mind from the first 10 pages and still blows my mind today. Trying to repeat my success at randomly picking up a book, I saw a copy of a double set of Nietzsche's Human All Too Human and Beyond Good and Evil, which I bought. After 30 pages into Human All Too Human, something finally clicked. I realized I had absolutely no idea about anything about life at all. This very sobering calm overcame me in realizing that, though I still didn't understand why my life collapsed in on itself, I wasn't even on the level that would allow me to understand this. I put aside that question and decided to focus on learning anything and everything from people who clearly are my betters. Today, not only do I have good answers to the questions that were far beyond me 5 years ago, but I also understand not only why my life collapsed, but why there was no other possible outcome for that sort of life. As Socrates said in the Apology, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I had been living the unexamined life before my wife left me. But when she did, and I was violently ripped out of it and cast into aporia, I was free of all my contradictory, nonsensical beliefs and could finally begin the inquiry. I am unfathomably stronger today, thanks to this inquiry. Those answers I do not know, I have methods into searching for them. But more importantly, I am much better equipped in answering should I questions. Questions like, should I quit my job? Should I go back to school? What should I do with my life? And should I kill myself? Philosophy is training for your very soul. What most people see as philosophy must really look retarded from the outside. Like a bodybuilder who is training also looks kind of retarded. People demand answers such as, what will you ever do with philosophy? What's the point in talking about nonsense like what exists or does not exist? Well, let me ask you, what will you ever do with elevating slabs of metal 8 times, 3 feet off the ground, 3 times a week? What's the point of running on a treadmill? You're not getting anywhere, are you? You might as well stand still and you'll be exactly in the same place you would be if you never ran. You see, people will justify bodybuilding because they can see the results. But they can see the results with their eyes. And the eyes do not need to be trained beforehand to see the results of bodybuilding. It's merely a sensual result that is accessible to confirmation for anyone with working eyes. But the benefits of philosophy is the development of the soul and mind. But unlike bodybuilding, the capacity to see the benefit is something you need to train for. This is why it looks retarded from the outside. And unlike bodybuilding, philosophy goes beyond making strong those parts of the mind we all commonly talk about, like your reasoning and problem-solving skills. No! If weightlifting did to bodybuilders what philosophy does to the soul, then bodybuilders would not only have big muscles, but would start to sprout wings. They would grow eagle eyes. They would sense sound like a bat, experience infrared like bees. This is what philosophy does to the soul. You experience a world so unlike before. Just think what the world must be like to children. Now, imagine that. That is how you see your current self as a philosopher. You would see yourself believing in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. You would, like you used to see the world before you knew of gynocentrism, hypergamy, and all those other MGTOW ideas. You would see yourself as a blue pillar, someone in the Matrix, where MGTOW is the red pill for male-female dynamics. Philosophy is the red pill for reality. Now, Anaximander. I paint a rosy picture of philosophy, but you must surely be asking yourself by now why the hell I am telling you all of this. How does this have anything to do with your situation or your question? Now, I've merely set the stage. And now let us take some arguments tackling your specific situation. You say that you are in a low-paying, dead-end job with little realistic hope for retraining into a career that you might find rewarding. First, you have an implicit assumption built into your belief here. You believe that a career can lead to a legacy. You also imply the premise that you do not wish to lead a hedonistic life. This premise, I gather, is implied from your desire to know as seeking knowledge for itself is not just another form of hedonism. The last premise you offer is that you wish to leave a legacy. I assume you will agree to all these premises. Okay, let's see what all this means. If you do not wish to live a hedonistic life and you wish to leave a legacy, then you must consider a desire for a legacy to not be hedonistic. If you believe that a career can lead to a legacy, then you believe that a career does not need to be hedonistic. After all, either your career or your desire for a legacy is hedonistic. This would contradict your desire to not live hedonistically. Now, would you not agree that your career would be the source of money that you would use to feed and shelter yourself? Well, surely you would. Let us say that you are a scientist working in academia. Let us even say that you are a senior researcher. Now, in order for you to be able to conduct your research, you would need to raise grant money. To raise grant money, you would need to compete with other senior researchers for a limited pool of money. Now, let's say the subject you wish to research you considered super important, but it is not considered super important by the community as a whole. After all, big breakthroughs come from radical and off-the-rails thinking. Some subjects would be popular and will easily raise money, while others will seem obscure or absurd and will have a very hard time raising money. So what happens now? Do you create a proposal for the project you consider important with a very low chance of getting funding, or do you create a proposal for a project that would be popular with a high chance of getting funding? If you pitch for your preferred project and don't get the grant, then you are essentially out of a job and without a source of income. If you pitch for a popular project, then you have just made a hedonistic decision because you have sold out your conviction for the goal of minimizing pain, meaning for minimizing the chance of being unemployed. But if you did pitch for the popular project, got funding, then made some sort of discovery securing a legacy, this legacy would have been attained through hedonism. But earlier we said a desire for a legacy could not be hedonistic. So we find ourselves in a contradiction. Either desire for legacy can be hedonistic and you wish to lead a hedonistic life, or a desire for a legacy can be hedonistic and you don't want to leave a legacy. So, in either case, you seem to be in contradiction with yourself. However, I don't think this is completely fair on my part. I think that providing for basic needs is not strong enough to accuse someone of being hedonistic. So, let's try a different argument. You desire to leave a legacy. You don't want to leave hedonistically, therefore you are willing to suffer to leave a legacy. Now, the greatest legacies can carry with them the highest price, that of death. Socrates was condemned to death by the Athenians for his legacy, as was Jesus. Galileo faced the Inquisition for his work and had to renounce it lest they burned him as a heretic. These, and countless others suffered death for their legacies. Now, if possible, it is best to avoid death when creating one's legacy, but if you are entertaining thoughts of suicide, then we can assume that it would be preferential to die with a legacy than to die without one, even if the price was life itself. I mean, you have all these people who volunteered to be sent to Mars to die, after all. I'm sure many of those people volunteered in hopes of a legacy. However, if you are willing to suffer death to leave a legacy, it follows that you should be willing to suffer less than death to leave a legacy. Like the suffering that comes from, say, a low-paying, dead-end job, perhaps? So, if you are consistent with yourself and not wish to lead a hedonistic life and wish to leave a legacy, it follows that you are willing to suffer for a legacy. And since you are willing to suffer the greater, you are willing to suffer the lesser. But if death is the greater, then a low-paying dead-end job is the lesser. Therefore, you are willing to suffer a low-paid dead-end job to leave a legacy. Now we are getting somewhere. Okay, new argument, new premises. You say you feel so far behind the curve in terms of education, skills, and finances that you are pessimistic about leaving a meaningful, long-lasting impact upon the world. First, I want to address this distinction you make between education and skill. Now, where an education is an activity, a skill is a kind of knowledge. In fact, what I believe you are referring to when you say skill is what Aristotle would call techne. So, Aristotle breaks down knowledge into four broad categories: episteme, techne, sophia, and phronesis. I point this out, Anaximander, because I want to make it very clear to you how universities work in the Western world. Episteme needs to be understood as the abstract theoretical stuff, like mathematics and physics. When you find yourself memorizing formulas and doing mathematical proofs, you are engaged in episteme. Now, this is a very different kind of knowledge from techne. Techne is a sort of knowledge that lets you build things. So, an architect who is drafting the blueprints for a football stadium would have episteme of things like metallurgy, physics, mathematics, and so forth. But he most likely would not have the first clue on how to actually build the damn thing. This is where the builder comes in. The builder is basically a construction worker who knows how to transform a blueprint into the physical thing. The builder will know how to get the material, how to tell if a material is good or bad. He will know what particular roles will need to be present in the project and so forth. The builder will have techne, but will most likely not understand the deeply theoretical stuff that was needed to create a blueprint of a structure that could viably exist in reality. So, these two types of knowledge cover a great deal of areas. So, what are Sophia and Phronesis then? Well, let us start with Sophia. The word itself is in the word philosophy, philosophia, from the Greek, where philo being the love of, or lover of, and Sophia being the Greek word for wisdom. So a philosopher, then, is a lover of wisdom. But what sort of things fall under Sophia that do not fall under episteme or techne? Well, first principles. It is the inquiry into reality itself. At this point, you must be thinking to yourself, how does this differ from something like theoretical physics? You mentioned a desire to learn quantum mechanics after all. Well, perhaps the best way for me to answer this question is to tell you a little story. Sir Isaac Newton, commonly considered the beginning of modern science, was a natural philosopher. You see, natural philosophy eventually became what we refer to as science. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. You see, when science came on the scene, more specifically the empirical method, philosophy suffered a sense of purposelessness. The question it was asking itself is the same question you are asking yourself. Why should I continue to exist? Now that we have science, and it seems to be doing very well in answering all these different questions, what is the purpose of philosophy? But philosophy did not die. Oh no. What it did is started looking into other places science was not able to cover. It started looking at the human mind. For a while then, philosophy had regained its identity leading up to the end of the 19th century. But then, at the end of the 19th century, psychology emerged as a product of philosophy, and once again, philosophy suffered another bout of purposelessness. Then what happened was the linguistic turn. This is where the study of language became of major philosophical interest, and from it came linguistics, from this point the technical language of symbolic logic, which led to the development of binary, which led to computers, and so on. You see, inquiry into Sophia is the discipline that produces the very fields that we now credit with all these great discoveries. This is the realm of inquiry that continues to shape and reshape what the human condition considers real. It is the human activity of trying to think that which has never been thought before. Finally, we have phronesis. Phronesis is best to be understood as practical wisdom. Phronesis is to Sophia what techne is to episteme. How do you apply all these theoretical things from Sophia into the real world? Well, that is phronesis. It is the ability to answer those should I questions. Questions like, how should I live? What should I be when I grow up? And so forth. Phronesis, however, is also contingent on life experience. There's a tempering effect that is needed from the experience of being alive that forges this type of knowledge in people. Now, why did I tell you all of this? Well, it all ties into your concern about being behind on education and skill. You see, university and pretty much all educational institutions only teach episteme and techne. You will only be exposed to Sophia if you happen to be a philosophy major. But because it is so detached from the day-to-day of the typical teenager who attends school that even if he is a philosophy major, it's most likely lost on him. Phronesis, on the other hand, is not taught even in a philosophy major. Phronesis is that which you get as a combination of studying Sophia and trying to apply it into your daily actions. So, as you can see, though you may not have a grounding in episteme like theoretical physics, or in a techne like engineering, you can rest assured that 99% of people know nothing of Sophia, and from the remaining 1%, fewer still have any phronetic knowledge. So, what does that mean to you? This means that if you engage yourself with Sophia, within a few years of self-study, you will be ahead of the curve of 99% of people. And trust me, you don't need to go to university or have any formal school to engage with this material. It's all on the internet, and most of the material is free. And if you are older, you will have the edge on younger people in attaining phronetic knowledge. So, in this way, I can say that your concerns of being behind the curve are, for some things, maybe warranted, but for others, not warranted at all. In Plato's Republic, Socrates explicitly states that the philosophers who would be considered for rule, need to be a minimum of 50 years old. Plato wrote in his dialogues over the course of 50 years or so, after all. These dialogues he was, still working on into his 80s or so. There's a quality about age that is grossly unappreciated, but in it there's a great insight that the young simply do not have access to. If you are older, Anaximander, you already possess something that puts you in a certain way ahead of the curve over the young. At this point, I want to tie everything together. The reason I told you about my life was to point out the soul of the oligarch. Anaximander, I feel much of what is in your concern in life, the concern with leaving a legacy, is the same in kind as the concerns of the oligarch. Old me, but only different in degree, different in the object, not the desire. We define our worth externally. We make our existence meaningful contingently on things outside of us. Whether it is money or a legacy, it makes no difference. The common denominator is that it is something that can be taken away. Money can be lost, and legacies destroyed or corrupted. It is hedonistic. This externalization of our worth is hedonistic. What is outside of us? That which can affect the body and translate back into us via pleasure or pain. So, are we not then both secretly hedonists? But then, we are in conflict with ourselves, are we not? Because we said we don't want to lead an hedonistic life. And once more, if our sense of worth is external and it is not fulfilled, do we not then consider the body denied its pleasure? Do we then not conclude that there is more pain than pleasure in the world and come to think that death is in fact the lesser and not the greater? Does suicide then not come as the correct answer for a hedonistic being? But, as you have asserted, you are not a hedonistic being. So suicide seems to be in contradiction with your own core beliefs. And in this way, associating your own worth with a legacy is also a contradiction with your own core beliefs. So now, I hope you find yourself in aporia, and perhaps start the inquiry into where your self-worth must truly be. You know my journey, and I hope it can serve you, as a guide on how to transform yourself to answer that question. The knowledge you are looking for is frenetic and can only come through knowing Sophia. Now, I want to get to your explicit question. Is pursuit of knowledge for itself a form of hedonism? The short answer is no. The long answer, well, you'll need to work for. But I don't want to seem arrogant and think that this video is some sort of silver bullet for you. I want to point you and all other men who are experiencing this same sort of philosophical crisis to a certain resource. There are an ever-growing number of people who find themselves struggling for meaning. Struggling with deep existential questions, and they don't necessarily even have the words to adequately describe them. All over the world, there's a slow but growing presence of philosophical counselors trying to tackle this modern phenomenon. This is counseling for the emotionally healthy who struggle with existential issues. One group I know and whose one counselor has helped me personally is a company based out of Ireland. They do phone, Skype, and personal interviews and sessions. Their website is www.phronesis.ie. Now, I'll leave the detail to the site in the video description. The specific service, Anaximander, I would seriously encourage you and all men in this position to leverage is one they call philosophical first aid. It is a completely free service and will talk through your specific situation and work with your specific belief system. Now, philosophical counseling does not try to change your belief system. It works within it to point out to you all your implicit contradictions, assumptions, and prejudices. From there, you decide what to do. If you want to speak to someone in person, then find such a philosophical counseling service, somewhere around your area. I know there are some in Finland and the Netherlands, and I'm sure there are more around the world. Philosophers deal in reason, not emotion, so it is not similar to traditional therapies. Philosophers used to be the advisors to emperors. Aristotle, for example, was the advisor to Alexander the Great. So, like Hesiod said, it is best to know for yourself. But if you do not know, then surround yourself with advisors who do. If you neither know for yourself, nor seek the counsel of those who do, well, then you are truly lost. I hope this has helped you, Anaximander, and thank you for reaching out. Thanks for listening. Go team.